Two members of the Proud Boys have been sentenced to 4 years in prison due to their involvement in a fight between the Proud Boys and Antifa. This is insane. I think it's absolutely insane. The main reason they're doing this, getting 4 years in prison over a street fight, to me is nuts, but the prosecutor or the state is essentially saying we don't want an escalation of gang violence, so they've ramped up the charges essentially to attempted gang violence, and 4 years in prison, man, over one stupid night. I gotta say, first and foremost, don't get into these fights. It's a really, really complicated story, and I do believe the city has gone soft on Antifa in a certain capacity. However, Antifa made the smart choice in refusing to cooperate with police, and therein lies the main problem faced by the conservatives, or the right-wing side of this. The Proud Boys are not wearing masks. The Proud Boys openly talk about what they did. The Proud Boys engaged Antifa to a certain capacity. I do believe that Antifa is at fault to another. It's really, really complicated. This particular moment, this fight they got into, wasn't necessarily self-defense, but you could technically argue it was because Antifa had robbed someone earlier. It's really, really complicated. But in the end, the Proud Boys don't wear masks and they cooperated with police. Congratulations, 4 years in prison. Antifa fled wearing masks and refused to give a statement. And the state did want to charge them. And that's why they got away with it. And they will never be held accountable. Let's read this story. And I want to show you some, essentially, my argument as to why I believe the state has gone hard on the Proud Boys. I don't care about what you think about the Proud Boys or Antifa. You know, this is not about which side is worse, which side is better. I think it's ultimately, if you're on the right, you will face heavier scrutiny, okay? The only reason the Proud Boys ended up getting arrested was because of press, because the New York Times, BuzzFeed, and other outlets were demanding it. And activists were saying, why aren't they being arrested? Rah, rah, hoorah, rah, right? Here's the thing. Antifa, at an event hosted by Mike Cernovich, jumped a guy, choked him out, and got arrested. This guy got sentenced to 16 months. An unprovoked assault which could have resulted in death, not mutual combat, okay? And this guy got less time. Let's read the news, and I don't want to, we'll break it down. Fox News reporting a Manhattan judge Tuesday sentenced two members of the right-wing Proud Boys group to 4 years in prison for pummeling leftist Antifa members during a brawl on the Upper East Side. Justice Mark Dwyer gave Maxwell Hare, 27, and John Kinsman, 40, terms that were 6 months above the minimum for the caught-on-camera skirmish near the Metropolitan Republican Club after Proud Boys founder Gavin McInnes delivered a speech. Both defendants faced as much as 15 years. They were convicted last August at a trial of attempted gang assault, and riot stemming from the October 12th, 2018 melee. It's a shame when some people jump up and down on a platform, Dwyer said in an apparent reference to McInnes, and their followers, their soldiers, get into trouble. Gavin McInnes has called for violence. I understand the left has taken him out of context in many of the circumstances where they claim he was calling for violence. However, he has, in some circumstances, made overt comments about getting violent. And it's just a fact. And that's when Gavin crossed the line. And don't take my word for it. Go look at the other videos when I've talked about this very same thing, and you will see a lot of the sentiment in the comments saying, you know, in some of these videos, Gavin may think he's joking, but he definitely took it a step too far. And that's going light on the guy. Now, you have these leftists who have made a super compilation of Gavin where they're literally taking things out of context. Like in one instance, Gavin was talking about choking a dog with a collar, like to train a literal dog. You pull the collar and he says, choke him, and literally refers to dogs. They cut that out. So the left overhypes it for sure. But even on the right, you see people still like, you know, going like, oh, Gavin, you know, ugh, because it's hard to get around. I don't want to get too much into Gavin because I want to focus on this, but that's the point he's making, that Gavin has gone up on these shows and said these things. But in the end, I do want to stress, this to me is insane. 4 years in prison, like you're ending these people's lives. You realize that, right? I think look, man, I think the prison system is broken. I think these dudes should not be getting 4 years. And man, I'm totally for criminal justice reform across the board. But let's just read. He added, I'm not sure the most moral responsibility belongs to these two defendants. Both Kinsman and Hare apologized for their conduct during the Manhattan Supreme Court sentencing. I'm sorry about the whole mess. I regret the entire incident, said Kinsman, who is married with 3 children. I made a mistake. In a similar statement, Hare told the judge, "I made a mistake that night. I made quick decisions. I'm sorry." They both testified at trial that they acted in self-defense. Assistant DA Joshua Steinglass argued for 5-year prison terms. This was not a schoolyard brawl. These are adults who should know better. The fight unfolded shortly after McInnes's speech ended, and the Proud Boys exited the venue, as 60 protesters, including members of Antifa, massed behind barricades and jeered at them. To avoid a confrontation, cops directed the Proud Boys west on 83rd Street, then south on Park Avenue, while they shepherded their opponents in the other direction. As the Proud Boys neared East 82nd Street, they saw 6 suspected Antifa protesters, clad in black, heading toward them. Instead of walking away, the defendants and their pals sprinted more than 100 feet toward their foes, instigating the fight, Steinglass said. Yup. Initially, when this was reported, we saw Antifa throw a bottle and then them charge in. But new surveillance footage that was eventually uncovered by the New York Times showed that the bottle was thrown after the Proud Boys started charging in. Here's the thing, though. According to BuzzFeed, just a few blocks away, Antifa robbed a guy and stole his backpack. This is where it gets into why I think 4 years is too hard. You want to argue about gang violence, and you want to give them the minimum sentence of, I believe, it's 4 years or whatever, or it's a little bit less than that. I'm listening because I do think escalation is a problem. But let's consider the greater context. The Proud Boys, for one, made a huge mistake. Not only did they win the fight, they went, they tried to, I guess, finish it, as they call it. Sorry, man. A lot of people on the Proud Boy side are saying, hey, man, sometimes you got to make sure they stay down to avoid a fight. I hear you. I get it. And in some instances, that will work. Not when you're a Proud Boy. You need to have tact, and you need to be aware that you need to be totally defensive. And this was a huge mess. Running towards Antifa, starting a fight. Man, you got to avoid confrontation, okay? There's a saying in, martial arts about the best way to win a fight is to not have one. So I understand. Here's the thing. Here's the greater context. When you're coming out of a club and you're surrounded by protesters, they've been violent before. They've bashed people over the head. We've seen Antifa violence. There's over 800 in the past couple of years of harassment and violence against Trump supporters. Even a few blocks away, Antifa jumped a guy and stole his backpack. So I think based on the context of the greater circumstance, I'm not surprised the Proud Boys took the decision that we need to get past these guys. We can't just keep turning around and running away. But in the end, they took it too far, and that's plain and simple. But to get 4 years, man, I just think that's nuts. Come on, seriously? Probation, I think, would have made a lot more sense. This is insane. 4 years in prison. They say Kingsman and Hare repeatedly punched, kicked, and stomped on the outnumbered and undersized Antifa members. The victims in the case were never identified, and Antifa refused to cooperate with the investigation. Prosecutors said that if they could have located the Antifa members, they would have also been charged. A total of 10 Proud Boys were charged in connection with the incident. 7 of them took plea deals, and 1 is still awaiting trial. I know enough about history to know what happened in Europe in the 30s when political street brawls were allowed to go ahead, Dwyer said during sentencing. We don't want that to happen in New York. So Dwyer, that was the ADA, right? No, it's not. I don't know. Who is Dwyer? Let's. I want to make sure we get the context perfect here, and I don't want to misstate who Dwyer is. That's Justice Mark Dwyer, the judge, I suppose. Yeah, so that's the judge in the case, and he's got a point. He's right. But I'll tell you this, man. Mike Cernovich put on an event. This guy right here, he got 16 months. Hold on. I think it's fair to point out Antifa has been charged and convicted in crimes. But wait. How come Antifa can show up, flying a flag, organizing under a banner, and not get gang violence against an innocent, unsuspecting person, but what essentially amounts to mutual combat gets these guys 4 years? You don't have to be a fan of the Proud Boys. That is not what this is about, okay? I think they should not be fighting, and they screwed up by doing so. They took things too far, but hold on. Antifa showed up to this club, okay? Mike Cernovich putting on an event, Night for Freedom. They show up, they're organized, they wear similar clothes, so it's hard to identify, so that when these brawls break out, like with the Proud Boys, they can escape and no one knows who they are. They're hiding their identity. They're engaging in organized street violence under a banner. How is that not gang violence? And when they targeted an innocent person, he gets 16 months? What happened with the Proud Boys and Antifa is both sides knowing these fights are possible and Antifa showing up to an event where the Proud Boys are. A lot of Trump supporters are saying it was total self-defense. Look, man, I don't care if you think it was self-defense or not. I think it's fair to point out the context of Antifa robbing a guy and taking his backpack, the Proud Boys knowing that Antifa usually engages, but failing to address tact, like you're a bad strategy, and understanding the heavy scrutiny you will face. This is more evidence that if you are on the right when it comes to these moments, you will be punished more severely. Sorry, that's the way it is. This is so much worse in my opinion. Now I will add, I'm not a lawyer. I can't tell you what, but this dude knocked a guy to the ground, choked him out, put the guy in the hospital. The Antifa guys left. They weren't even that scuffed up. They just left. Well, it's gang violence. Well, what is this? They targeted Trump supporters. This guy put a guy in the hospital. It's mind-blowing to me that he's going to get 16 months and the Proud Boys are going to get 4 years. Now, of course, fully expect all the left to be like, Tim Pool defending the Proud Boys, blah, blah. No, I'm critical of a biased criminal justice system that is more concerned about bad PR and about how media pressure focusing specifically on the Proud Boys and ignoring this. Who reported on this, okay? When this guy shows up and nearly kills a dude, let's read. He says, Campbell was arrested near a nightclub after he punched and choked a 56-year-old man he had followed out of the event. He was one of 80 Antifa agitators protesting the gathering. They say, quote, when the Proud Boys got into a street fight with Antifa members, it was a nationwide story. The mayor and AG tweeted about the street fight. When Antifa attacked a 56-year-old man, silence from the press, Cernovich told the Post. Now that the criminal case is closed, I will be taking legal action, and that's what, Cernovich said. That's a good point. Where's the outrage that a 56-year-old man was choked, punched, knocked to the ground, put in the hospital? 16 months. Dude, this is gang violence too. Look, first of all, I think prison sentences are insane as it is. I seriously think like a month in jail is intense for the average person. That is shocking, and it destroys your life. You don't listen. There's a lot of people are gonna be like, 1 month, it's so bad. Your paychecks, okay, they dry up. You get out, you miss a month. Now you gotta ask friends for help. You're fired from your job, you're late on rent, you can be evicted, lose your car, your credit cards, all of that in 1 month. 1 month. Let's say you get 2 months. Now you're 2 months behind on rent, 2 months behind on cars. You got to get your affairs in order. You got to break leases. You got to ask someone to take care of you. It is a serious problem. And it's not about the Proud Boys because you know what? They made their bed. I get it. Antifa starts these fights. They had enough. They wanted to fight back. You know what? It doesn't matter. The court doesn't care about context, and neither does the press. So you might be screaming, it's so unfair. The Proud Boys are getting the scrutiny, and the press was writing about it, but Antifa gets away with all these things. You know what? You know the rules, right? You know that the city is not going to tweet about Antifa. They're going to tweet about the Proud Boys. And that's unfair. It's absolutely unfair that this guy and 80 people can show up and injure this guy. It's totally unfair. But you have to know this. Everyone knows this. Mike Cernovich knows this. This story, October 5th, I think it's fair to point out that if you're on the right, you must be aware that you are not going to be protected. And it's rather unfortunate, but I'll tell you what, man. Should this guy get 16 months? I kind of lean towards 16 months is pretty intense. It is. Maybe too much. However, he almost killed somebody. And so it's a challenge, right? He showed up to an event. He followed a guy out. He knocked him down, punched him and choked him out, put the guy in the hospital. Whew. Yeah, it's a tough call. Tough call. The Proud Boys, Antifa showed up to their event. Antifa robbed someone leaving the venue at a few blocks away. Antifa has repeatedly attacked these people before and gotten into street fights. The context is very, very different. I view this almost as a mutual combat situation, in which case, if two people show up to fight each other, what do you do? But I'll stress, one final point. Look, man, you might not want to hear it. And I know there's gonna be a lot of people who are like, this is not fair, this is not fair. You're right, it's not fair. It's absolutely not fair. Everybody knows it's not fair. The left will claim it is fair, okay? They're already on Reddit saying, but look at this guy who got 16 months. It's totally fair. Dude, that's not fair at all. He attacked an innocent guy who was leaving and he followed him. That guy didn't want to fight. Antifa and the Proud Boys, they fight, okay? So it's very, very different. And man, 4 years, their lives are over. That's done. That dude, Kinsman, I think his name is that the 40-year-old John Kinsman? He's got kids, man. His kids are going to grow up without his dad, or at least for 4 years. Now, maybe they'll get out earlier, but still, I think any prison time for this kind of brawl is ridiculous. It's nuts. But I will stress, expect to see more of this. Absolutely. There's a concern about escalation. Antifa knows not to deal with cops, not to talk to cops. And guess what? They're free. They came to the venue. One guy gets robbed. They throw a bottle. They played their part in this and they lost, right? When has Antifa been charged and convicted for the violence they've gotten into? You know why they don't? You know why all of the people who rioted in DC 2 years ago got away with it? They're wearing masks. They organize. The government tried to go after them. They couldn't. Maybe so there you go. You want to talk about what's fair or not? If you're on the right and you want to show up and be proud of who you are and what you believe, congratulations, the state will use that against you. It's funny. It's funny because my view on criminal justice, the police and everything, it leans left for sure, man. Overbearing state repression. And now you can see the Proud Boys are facing the brunt of that while Antifa has walked away because Antifa exploits the system. They know the rules, they've been organizing longer, and they're going to get it, and they get away with it. Not only did the Antifa involved in this get away with it, but the Antifa guy who choked and punched a guy got 16 months. I think probation for both would have been fine. I think probation is serious. You're monitoring them, get an ankle bracelet or something, track their behavior, have them check in, tell them no more protest activities, let them be with their families. I think, whatever, man. It's nuts. It truly is crazy. And I will stress, the only reason this ended up where it is now is because journalists targeted the Proud Boys. Journalists saw the brawl, sought out surveillance footage, reported stories like they weren't arrested and New York won't say why. Press is what resulted in the Proud Boys getting arrested. I'd love to see the journalists talk about Antifa clubbing that guy overhead in Portland. They don't. BuzzFeed never wrote a story saying Antifa clubbed a Bernie Sanders supporter over the head and the police didn't arrest him and they won't say why. They don't. Where are those stories at? But hey, you know what, man? I'll end by saying this. Gavin in the past has gone too far. And that's just not my opinion. A lot of people have talked about that. And I think you got to call it like you see it. The Proud Boys, they wanted to finish the fight. I can understand the mentality, especially as Antifa has attacked them in the past and all that. But you know what, man? You win every fight you run away from, right? So don't be surprised when the media industry already smears and defames you. And then you walk around getting into fights, cooperating with the state, with the police, the city. And then the press comes out and demands you get arrested. Look, New York City is a liberal place. They're not going to defend you, Proud Boys. And now you're going to prison for 4 years. I think that is a travesty. I think it's I think the system is horrifying. And what people need to understand, okay? They're so confused about what my politics are. But Tim, he has left-wing politics, but how come he agrees with some conservatives? Because I'll tell you what, it's not about tribe, it's about principle. And the principle is, these Proud Boys who show up in New York City and are being punished under this law while the left cheers, guess what? Out of the 1,000 times these laws are used to prosecute, it is 0.1% that they target right-wing white individuals. It's almost entirely the city using these against poor minority communities. You want to talk about how to solve these problems? You can't cheer when the state sentences people to 4 years for getting into a fight with another group. Because the city is now going to use this and say, you didn't complain when we did it to the Proud Boys. Why would you complain when we go to the Bronx and do it to these people? You know what? People are so concerned about tribe and race, they don't care about the laws that are being wielded against them. And I warned over and over again about censorship against conservatives and how it's going to trickle into the left, and we're all next. And guess what? We see it. It's happening. The anti-war left, Tulsi Gabbard, look, these tech companies are going after them. It's about principle. You have to protect rights for everybody, even those you don't like. My advice to you, man, do not get into a fight. If Antifa comes to start a fight, just defend yourself. And you may get mad and say, it's not fair. We have a right to self-defense. I didn't say it was fair. It's not fair. End of story. It's not fair. If you want to win, you got to learn what the rules are and how it's being used against you. You want to get into a fight, stomp some dudes while they're on the ground? Too bad. Like, there you go. You're going to get arrested. Not only that, they live streamed this, and some dude started jumping up and down, bragging and talking about how he slammed a guy's head in the ground and all this stuff. Sorry, I get it. You're getting that emotional satisfaction, and now they're coming for you. So you know what, man? I don't know what to tell you guys. Stop fighting. That's the easiest thing to do. And so much of what the Proud Boys want to do, there's my understanding is the fourth degree is that you've gotten into a fight with Antifa in defense of free speech or some constitutional value or something. And this is what you get. You can't do it. That's just, whatever, man. I know I'm basically gonna get it from everybody for talking about this. The Proud Boy, pro Proud Boy type people are gonna be mad at me saying you should be defending them, blah blah. Antifa's gonna be like you're defending them too much. I don't care, dude. Whatever, man. Look, I'll end this. 4 years is insane. Okay, 16 months, in my opinion, is even insane. I think probation. We need to simmer things down. I think the criminal justice system is broken in so many ways. It's not going to solve the problem to lock these dudes up for 4 years, especially a guy who has kids, especially a guy who's 27. This is insane. Okay? And the Antifa guy from the party, I understand a lot of people might be cheering for 16 months. I think that's pretty much over the line too. I understand it's difficult. Could have killed the guy. Yes. But we have to remain calm. Okay? And it's not just that. I'm very, very much a no private prisons, prison reform, criminal justice reform, rehabilitation kind of person. This is not solving the problem. It's making it worse. People are going to look at this and they're going to say the state is supporting Antifa, and that's what they're saying. And you already have the press saying, why won't they be arrested? It is a partisan fight that there's no justice here. End of story. I'm done. Okay, I'm going to rant forever. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m., and I will see you all then.